This is Grace Notes. I'm Alan Button, and pleased to have as our guest in the studio, Crystal Cockman. Crystal is the Director of Conservation with Three Rivers Land Trust, a graduate of Duke University, both at the undergraduate level, and she earned her master's degree in environmental management, and that, of course, tells us something about how she spends her time. Crystal, welcome.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Crystal, let us start off, if we could, with your telling us a little bit about your background. And I'll, I guess, jump in by way of further introduction and say to our audience that Crystal is from Robbins, North Carolina. Why don't you take it from there?
Sure. Yep, I grew up in Robbins, in a house just outside, a couple miles out of town. My parents had, 35 acres or so, and I grew up being outside. My grandparents lived down the street, so I rode my bike up and down the road a lot. Grew up catching caterpillars and making mud pies and just finding any excuse I could to be outdoors.
Sounds like a great childhood. You mentioned to me before we came into the studio another set of grandparents
So
up the road?
My mom's parents lived in Seagrove, and they had a small farm, so cows, goats, ducks. So I also spent a lot of time up there with them. Also, just being outdoors and enjoying the, serenity of living in the country.
Now, there was something that I think you said was a little bit of a turning point for you in sixth grade. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so I had always had an interest in environmental issues. I was the kid that made my parents buy recycling bins, but we were given an assignment in sixth grade to study a future career, and I was given environmental scientist, which I did not know was an option before that time. And, ever since then, that's sort of been the direction my life has taken.
What did that do for you in terms of your studies, both in high school and beyond?
Yeah, so in high school, I took a lot of science classes, biology, chemistry, and my dad was a Duke fan from as time early as I can remember, and so I was just fortunate that Duke also has a great environmental school, so that was an easy choice for me. Very
good. And so you went through 4 years at Duke, and then what about after that?
So I went straight into the master's program there also at the Nicholas School. I was in the Master of Environmental Management, which was a 2-year program. And between the 2 years, the summer between the 2 years, I was given an internship with the Land Trust, which sort of, I came as an intern and I've never left.
Tell us something about what sort of outdoor adventures or venues have been of particular significance for you.
I do a lot of hiking and kayaking, and I guess one of the more notable experiences, I spent a week out in Colorado in Aspen, camping by the Maroon Bells. Which is just
what are the Maroon Bells?
If you see a picture of Colorado, it's probably of the Maroon Bells. It's these 3 purple mountain peaks with a glacial lake in front of them.
Okay.
So yeah, just camped a couple of minutes from the base of that lake on the White River, and also was able to climb a 14er while I was out there, which was a cool experience.
By 14er, you mean more than 14,000 feet high?
That's right.
That's way up there.
That is pretty high.
I think you told me it's the second highest peak in the
lower 48.
Yep. Boy, I gather that has something to do with this first song that you've selected.
That's right.
Tell us about that.
Yeah, so I chose Rocky Mountain High by John Denver. And, as it starts in the summer of my 27th year, which is exactly when I visited.
Okay.
Strangely enough, but, it's a great song. It also has obviously a conservation tilt to it when he talks about more people, more scars upon the land. Out west, you think of there being limitless land. There's a low population and a lot of area. But even out there, they're facing development pressures, and we face them even more in North Carolina.
We'll come back to some of that because I'd like to have you share with us something of your... That was Rocky Mountain High by John Denver. If you're just joining us, our guest today is Crystal Cockman. Crystal is the Director of Conservation at Three Rivers Land Trust. Doc, they call you, I understand, Crystal?
In the office, that's a name I've been given, yes.
DOC, Director of Conservation. Very good. Well, Crystal, tell us a bit about what Three Rivers Land Trust is.
So, Three Rivers Land Trust is a nonprofit land conservation group. We are based out of Salisbury, but we cover 15 counties. So we go basically from Statesville to Fayetteville in the center part of North Carolina. And we work with private landowners to conserve properties, either through conservation easements, which are legal documents that restrict development. And we also work with a lot of partner agencies like state parks and the national forests to transfer lands into public ownership.
And I gather that Three Rivers Land Trust is one of a number of land trusts in North Carolina?
I think there are 23 land trusts across the state, and we all have very similar missions, but work in different geographic areas.
And I'm guessing that Three Rivers must be one of the larger ones, given that your geographic scope is 15 counties.
Yeah, we are the second largest in the state by area. So Coastal Land Trust is the only one that's bigger than us.
I see. Tell us something about where the name comes from.
Yeah, so Three Rivers Land Trust is a relatively new name for our organization. We started out as the Land Trust for Central North Carolina, which is a little bit longer and more cumbersome to say. So we changed to Three Rivers Land Trust in 2018, and the three rivers were the Uwharrie, the Rocky, and the Yadkin PD. And at that point in time, we covered 10 counties, and each of those counties touched at least one of those rivers.
I see.
But we merged in 2019 with the Sandhills Area Land Trust and picked up 5 additional counties, including more. And so now we just sort of say, pick your favorite 3 rivers.
And your coverage area then includes the Cape Fear River.
It does. Yeah, we go as far east as Harnett and Cumberland counties.
You mentioned conservation easements. Tell us a little bit more about what those are.
Yeah, so a conservation easement is basically a legal document that restricts development and subdivision of a property. And each one is different. They're tailored to the land, and they meet the goals of the landowner as far as conservation values of the property. To protect those and to ensure that the land is never intensively developed.
So I gather there is quite a variety of potential versions of conservation easements.
Yeah, so we do forever wild easements, which are more sort of natural area protection easements, kind of a no-touch approach that you just sort of allow nature to do its thing. We also do a lot of working farm and forest easements where the landowner can continue to operate a farm on the land or do timber operations to bring in income. They just won't ever let it become a subdivision or a trailer park or something like that.
Can you give us an example of the benefits to a landowner to agreeing to a conservation easement?
Yeah, so we do basically 2 different types of conservation easements. We do either purchased easements where the landowner is actually compensated financially for the easement, and also donated easements. And in the case of a donated easement, the landowner is able to obtain tax benefits for doing that.
I see. How do you get the word out about the possibility of conservation easements for somebody who might be interested?
Yeah, we don't do a great job of that, actually.
Maybe this program will help a little.
I hope so. I would say that the majority of the easement work that we do is landowners who come to us who have heard about it from their neighbor or their family member who has worked with us and had a good experience, mostly word of mouth.
Tell us something about how you spend your day, if you have a typical day, and I'm guessing you probably don't, but tell us more about what you do.
Sure. Yeah, I would not say that I have a typical day. I do work a lot of weekends. We have events and things like that, but Generally speaking, I am either in the office working on grant writing or drafting easements or grant administering, or I am in the field meeting with landowners, talking to them about their properties or actually walking the properties and taking inventory of them.
So for somebody who loves the outdoors, this is a pretty good fit, it sounds like.
It is a good fit. Yeah, I get to spend probably half of my time in the office and half of my time in the field. So on rainy days, I don't have to be out there, but when it's nice, I get to spend it outside, and that's really nice.
You mentioned before we came into the studio to me something about the opportunity that you have to develop or establish relationships with various landowners as something that is a real plus for you.
Yeah, I always say that I work with the best people on earth. People who want to conserve their land, just generally have an appreciation for what it provides and don't want to see that destroyed. And those are, just great people to work with.
People who share your commitment and the commitment, I dare say, of many who maybe haven't thought about it in sort of the programmatic terms that you're describing, but to share the priority for preservation of habitat and wildlife and such.
Absolutely.
How do you spend your time when you're not working?
I'm usually outside. I spend a lot of time on the weekends hiking and kayaking. I've got a great group of friends that also like to be outside. So if it's nice, that's where you'll find me, on the Uwharrie Trail or the Little River, probably.
Uh-huh. The Uwharrie Trail. That's, I gather, sort of in the middle of the geographic area that you're responsible for.
Yeah.
Tell us more about the Uwharrie Trail.
Yeah, so the Uwharrie Trail has been a project that I've worked on since I started at the Land Trust, really. It's a 40-mile footpath in Randolph and Montgomery counties. It was started by Joe Moffett and the Boy Scouts back in the 70s, and it always went through some private and some public land. He had handshake agreements, so as people left land to heirs or moved away, sections of the trail were lost. So we've been purchasing properties and transferring them to the National Forest and building sections of trail to restore it. And so now you can hike the full 40-mile Uwharrie Trail in its entirety.
And I gather you're sort of a regular on the trail. True?
I do spend a lot of time out there.
Tell us about this next song that you've selected, Crystal, The Rose.
Yeah, so, one of the things that is so special to me about my job is that I get to be outside in the springtime when things are waking back up. I definitely am more of a spring and summer girl. So I appreciate after the winter that we've got wildflowers to look at along the rivers and creeks. It's just a great time to be out in the woods right now. And I think, this song is all about kind of rebirth and being able to find yourself and be willing to challenge yourself. And I think that's something that nature gives us the opportunity to do.
Yeah, and it's got some pretty powerful words in terms of, as you say, challenging yourself. You were telling me, too, about a special personal connection with this song.
Yeah, I actually sang this song at the International Key Club Convention my freshman year of high school. So that was really special in front of several hundred folks, and they all started clapping to it, which kind of surprised me.
You wouldn't expect that necessarily.
But that was great. It was a great experience.
Do you still sing?
Some, not as much as I used to, but yeah, every now and then I'll sing in church. But yeah, mostly just for myself.
Very good. Let's hear it. The Rose by Bette Midler.
Some say love, it is a river that drowns.
That was The Rose by Bette Midler. Crystal, can you tell us something about the numbers of acres that we're talking about with respect to Three Rivers Land Trust work?
Yeah, so we've been around since 1995, and we have protected a little over 41,000 acres About 8,000 acres of that is land that we actually own and manage ourselves. We've transferred about 5,700 acres to other public agencies like state parks, national forests, game lands. We've protected over 16,000 acres of farmland. So those are some of the numbers of areas we've protected.
We're talking about a lot of acres then.
Absolutely.
In these 15 counties. When you say that the land trust owns and manages some 8,000 acres, what does that ownership and management look like? What does that mean?
So we own several larger tracts of land, one of which is about 1,400 acres in Montgomery County on the Uwharrie River, and it's a nice hardwood forest, but we do what we can to enhance it as well. So we actually have a conservation lands manager on staff, and we do prescribed burns. We do timber stand improvement for birds and other wildlife. So we do what we can to not only protect the land, but leave it better than we found it.
Is it open to the public?
So our lands are not generally open to the public. We do host events that are open to the public.
I see.
But we sort of our arm of getting the public involved on conservation lands is through the properties we transfer to public agencies.
Got you. Well, that seems to me it fits into the general priority for preserving habitat. Maybe you could speak to that. What is the value, the significance, the importance of preserving habitat?
Yeah, so as we were talking about earlier, I think it's important to preserve habitat and biodiversity, both from an intrinsic value, just that, species have been around for some of them thousands and hundreds of thousands of years, and having those around for future generations to be able to observe as well is, something that is worth taking the time to protect and to improve the habitat so that those species will continue to persist.
And from an ecological standpoint, from a wildlife standpoint, habitat is essential. Can you speak to that from sort of maybe a scientific or biological standpoint?
Yeah, so, every species needs somewhere to exist, and some of them are very specialized in where they exist. And in terms of the habitat I was talking about, where we had done some improvements for bird species, different birds nest at different portions of the canopy, and so having a variegated forest that allows for different species to exist in different areas, just managing for that is, I think, really important.
And speaking of birds, I just heard recently about the remarkable migration patterns of birds. In fact, how much of it goes on at night that we're unaware of. But you speak of the different levels in the canopy that are necessary for birds. They've all got different requirements.
Yeah, and it's just amazing to me. We do a naturalist event every spring where we have an ornithologist from the museum in Raleigh that comes out to that same property, and we look at the different neotropical birds, and these are birds that have flown 2,000 miles or more to come here in the summer to raise their young because our days are longer here. And, in some cases, they come back to the same tree year after year to build their nest. It's really remarkable.
It strikes me, Crystal, that you may, on occasion, maybe more than occasionally, run into skeptics. How do you deal with people who maybe don't buy into the priorities represented by the land trust or yourself personally?
Yeah, well, I would say that I encounter that much less frequently than you might think. Generally speaking, the folks that I get to deal with on a regular basis are people that really believe in our cause and, appreciate what we're doing for the benefit of wildlife and for future generations. But it is, a job that you do have successes and failures. Not every project we do gets across the finish line and sees permanent protection, but there are many of them, and I think it's important to celebrate those successes.
Well, that's good to hear. And you're an optimist.
I am definitely an optimist.
It seems to me, Crystal, that there's plenty of room, despite your personal optimism, for folks in your line of work to be discouraged.
Yeah,
Is there anything?
absolutely.
Yeah, can you say something about that and what you do or what others do?
Yeah. A friend of mine actually sent me a blog recently called Lonely Conservationists. And
Uh-huh.
it kind of highlights the fact that it is hard what we do. And, a lot of conservationists kind of struggle with depression and other things like that because, sometimes it feels like you're fighting a losing battle. You'll never be able to save it all. And, not that we want to save all of it, there needs to be a balance, but it is a challenging thing to, see places that once were beautiful natural areas turned into subdivisions and shopping malls.
Well, it strikes me, Crystal, that it's great to have someone like you in this line of work doing things that a good number of us applaud and desire.
Thank you.
If people want more information about Three Rivers Land Trust, where can they get that?
Yeah, so we have a website, threeriverslandtrust.org, and we also are on Facebook and Instagram, so you can check us out on social media or visit our website.
And the website address is what?
threeriverslandtrust.org.
Uh-huh. Okay, good. Well, it so happens that our conversation here fits right in with Earth Day. You want to wind things up by saying something about Earth Day?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like every day should be Earth Day.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, no, to have a day set aside that, celebrates the wonderful world that we have and the natural areas and, other things that we have to enjoy, I think is, just a good indication that we're forward thinking and are able to kind of celebrate what we have, which is really great.
This year, Earth Day, Thursday, April 22nd. You mentioned to me, Crystal, before we came into the studio, a couple of special events with respect to the Uwharrie Trail coming up. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so we have our 9th annual through hike, which is a 4-day, 40-mile backpacking trip on the Uwharrie Trail, which starts near Troy and finishes up near Ashboro. And we have that. We're actually doing it twice this year. So coming up the end of April, we'll be doing it that weekend, the last weekend of April, first weekend of May. And then we'll also have another one in October.
Very good. Well, a bit of a challenge there for most anybody. Backpacking 40 miles in 4 days, we're talking an average of 10 miles a day.
That's right. That's right.
Will you be on both of those hikes?
So I have organized all of the through hikes except for this spring one. Our associate director has organized this one, so I will actually be able to hike it.
Good. Doing a little delegation so you can hike it yourself. Huh?
So yeah, I'll be hiking this one. I did hike the first two, but I've been sort of a trail angel the rest of the time, making sure everybody has what they need and gets where they're supposed to be. So this one coming up the end of the month, I will be able to be out there walking the trail with everybody.
Very good. Well, Crystal, we're short on time. Tell us about this last song. I think it's a good one to wrap up with.
Yeah,
Somewhere Over the Rainbow.
Yeah, so as you said earlier, I definitely consider myself an optimist. And so even though there are challenges to the type of work that I do, I feel like there's always something better on the other side. There's definitely, going to be successes that you have that you can celebrate as well. And I really appreciate this song and this version because I think it's just very simple and pure, and it's kind of a good way to end things.
And we're talking not just about your work, but life generally. A great song for all of us, whatever we're going through.
That's right.
Crystal, it's been a treat having you here. Thank you very much for coming in and spending some time with us.
Thank you so much.
We're going to hear the version by Iz playing the ukulele. Again, thank you, Crystal.
Thank you.
Let's hear it. Somewhere Over the Rainbow by Iz.